and online listeners to the October 30th, 2023 meeting of the American Rescue Plan Community of Practitioners. I am Dr. Richard Lewis, ARP Program Administrator for the Office of Learning Recovery and Acceleration, and I call this meeting to order. Our agenda and materials are available online through the DPI website. Also, it has been shared with you via email. This meeting is also live streamed through a link shared in the public-facing agenda. I will now read our ethics statement that is required of us. Committee members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this committee. Does any member of the committee know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to my attention. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in the discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Are there any conflicts of interest? Please make note of this in the chat if so. Now, we'd like to go to the approval of the agenda. You've had an opportunity to look at it. If you're not familiar with Robert's Rules of Order, you will make a motion, and then we'll have a second of the motion, and we will just conduct this on a verbal vote. So if anyone is opposed, we'll say all in favor, and if I don't hear anyone or what have you, but if we hear any opposed, then I'll ask for anyone to speak up if they have an opposal to that item. So, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda? Unmute yourself and we'll go from there.
I move that we accept the agenda as presented.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Lisa Phillips, second.
Thank you. All right. And by any type of sound or what have you, all approve?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And so it is. So we're going to move forward with the agenda as is. Let's go to the next one. We are reconstituting the Committee of Practitioners, and we will have an election where the committee members will vote online for a chair. I will share the results, but not declare the winner. Once I have all the results, then we will declare a selection for the chair. I will share the poll after the meeting. And then I will email the committee member selected for the position of chair once everyone submits their votes, and then they will serve through the completion of their term. The term dates will be listed in the minutes. Now, we would like to move to the agenda. Next piece, please. All right. Oh, well, we need to nominate.
We need to take nominations.
Yes, all names will be included on the poll. And so as you have those nominated for chair, then we will give you another and you can then vote for the chair, and then we'll make everyone aware of that choice. All right. Now we would like to have our roll call. So you can respond by saying present or yes, here. All names will be included on the Elizabeth Anderson.
Present.
Sean Black. Matthew Cheeseman.
Present.
Casey Corey. Lucy Edwards,
Present.
John Eldridge,
Present.
and forgive me if I mispronounce any names, Tiffany Farrell,
Present.
Eugenia Floyd,
Present.
Stephen Gay,
Present.
Jessica Hofstetler, Stetter,
Present.
Andrew Hulian,
Present.
Margaret Howard, all right, Tina Lance, Luann Llewellyn,
Present.
Robert Lubke, Bradley Mills,
Present.
Lisa Phillips,
I'm here, thank you.
thank you, Lily Seymour, Charlotte Trez,
Present.
Lisa Van Doolen,
Present.
Jenny Watson, Tamika Walker Kelly.
Present.
All right, thank you. Next, we will go over the Office of Innovation updates. So to bring our committee of practitioners up to speed, we're going to go over some of the high points over the past year. And as you can see these items listed, you'll see a picture there of our original OLR team at the first ARP convening. And then you also see a picture below it when we went to the National Comprehensive Center, the ESSEA in Indianapolis, where we shared with other PSUs and SEAs from across the country. Next slide. We also did visits to more than 20 PSU site visits and consultations during this time. We did an overview of PRC 176 and 177, 178, and 189. We're still working on some of these. Some of these are ESSER 2. We went all across the state, basically. We had evidence-based strategic planning in that window from February to May, where we met with the Southwest, the Northwest region, North Central, Western, and the Piedmont. We went to all 8 regions within the span of that summer. All right, next one. And to bring you up to speed to where we are now, you'll see our leader down there at our latest ARP convening, as well as some of the collaborations that have been occurring across the agency. You'll see our director with the section chief from the Office of Federal Programs, as well as an opportunity down there in Dare County that students had over the summer, where they got to learn with the marine biologists out there at East Carolina University. So as we move forward, we're looking at the community of practitioners to help us determine these next steps as we enter into the final stretch of our ESSER funding. So right now, one of the big items is, where are we in relations to funds? You will have access to the slide deck at the end of the meeting, and we can show you right here where we have a statewide percentage of COVID funds spent. If you click on that hyperlink, that will give you a graphic of where we are as a state, but also just to highlight some key points here. In ESSER 2, these funds expired on September the 30th, 2023. We had about 11% remaining, with the overall being about 0.03% of it remaining. So PSUs did a good job of using these funds and making the most of these opportunities. And as we look at ESSER 3, these funds will expire on September 30th, 2024. We still have about 73% remaining, which gives us a great window of opportunity. So the community of practitioners will be critical in the strategic planning of this. And we have an overall remaining amount of around, well, is that one? Yeah. Okay, about 32% still remaining. 1 billion, actually. All right. Yes, please. Next, we will have our Director of the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, Rachel Wright-Junio, who will go over the questions to consider as we move forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Sorry, we are all sitting in the same room, and so we are having some audio. We're having to play with the audio issues, so thank you for your patience with that. So Richard just shared the remaining ESSER 2 funds that we have left, and then the remaining ESSER 3 funds, which PSUs still have time to spend. So something that we noticed with the ESSER 2 was that in the overall ESSER 2 bucket, which is PRC 171, we had the PSUs spent almost all of that money, which is excellent. However, in the OLR specific programs, which come from the state set aside, we still had about 11% of those funds remaining. And we also see that same trend occurring with these ESSER 3 funds. So ESSER 3, as Richard mentioned, ends on September 30th of 2024. However, the PSUs are doing a great job spending their general ESSER 3, PRC 181 funds. However, we still have about almost 75% of our OLR programs, which are Summer Career Accelerator, and also the after school program that comes from the state set aside, which is PRC 189. It's the academic enrichment programs. So something that I kind of want you to start thinking about, and we're going to get your feedback on this a little bit later in the meeting today, is how can we assist districts and schools in spending their funds in a way that's going to make the biggest difference for the most students and doesn't put districts or schools in a bind when ESSER ends. So we're kind of doing this delicate balance between sustainability and student outcomes. Our students are still behind where they were pre-pandemic. So we want to make the most difference we can, but we also don't want districts to be suffering when these funds end. So we want to help districts and schools make good decisions about how they might be able to use these funds. So kind of be thinking about that as we're going through and you're hearing the various updates. And then also brainstorming how we can facilitate here at DPI responsible and full spending of those OLR administered programs, which I mentioned are the Summer Career Accelerator and the academic enrichment programs. So these are just two questions I wanted you all to start thinking about as we go through our time together today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Richard.
Thank you. All right. So next we will have Office of Innovation updates. We have Dr. Angie Molnax, as well as Dr. Jenny Korn. Dr. Korn, we're going to have, and then the leader of the entire Office of Innovation, Dr. Andrew Smith, who will go first.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being with us and taking the time late on a Monday afternoon to kind of work through some of the things that have been happening since we last were with you. We know that you have busy schedules, so we greatly appreciate your time today. I just want to say that if your ESSER clock isn't ticking already, it should be, because tomorrow we will have less than 11 months left before ESSER ends. And I have been trying to shout this from the mountaintops to any group I can. You guys likely already know this, but with ESSER being one of the largest influxes of cash into our schools and districts across the nation, we are up against a huge financial cliff. And that has sure implications for children in North Carolina. And so we are working really hard to try and develop tools to help support you all to, number one, spend down the rest of your ESSER dollars effectively. We mentioned there's still about $1 billion left to spend in 11 months. And if there's anything I know is that good procurement typically happens over longer amounts of time, meaning that we're more intentional about how we spend money. And what I also know from a former role in the school system is that when given a short amount of time, Sometimes we can spend that money in the quickest manner possible, but not always the way that directly impacts children. And so we're really challenging districts and school leaders to think about the remaining dollars they have left and to use some of the information you're about to hear in the rest of this presentation to make informed decisions about how to move through the next 11 months, which then kind of brings up, well, what's post-ESSER going to look like? We know that districts and schools across the country have hired staff members. That means that there are going to be significant impacts to personnel, and understanding where those individuals are going to be going is something we need to be planning for right now. But we also need to be thinking about strategic planning. I argue to folks all the time that if you built a strategic plan during COVID with the assumptions that ESSER was going to fund your strategies, it's time to redo that strategic plan, because that funding isn't going to be remaining. And if it's the underlying assumption that you can pay for some of those strategies, we have to think deeply about those. So we want to work closely with you to understand return on investment around what you spent during ESSER, using some of the rich data resources that we've created through the Office of Learning Recovery and Research and Evaluation to inform your decision-making around strategic planning. And so our hope is that over the next 11 months, you're not only thinking about how you're going to spend that money down in a real fruitful manner that is really driven towards student outcomes, but also how you're going to run the business after ESSER is over. And we want to think about how we look at doing zero-based budgeting in schools and districts to really put the most effective strategies on the baseline of that budget. The things that are going to impact kids the most to go on the baseline and build our budget from there. Because we're predicting at least single-digit decreases in funding across the state. You add that on top of decreasing in enrollment, and you've really found yourself in kind of a perfect storm. So we want to provide you with some tools as part of our office with the Office of Innovation. I just want to mention, you did meet a new person there. Ms. Rachel Wright-Junio is the new director of the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration. We are very excited to have her on our team. She has extensive knowledge of federal programs and also as well as migrant education. And so she's been a wealth of knowledge in helping us think through the next 11 months and also post-ESSER. So welcome aboard. If you've seen a new face, that's who she is. The Office of Innovation has lots of projects going on. We are a conglomerate of several different offices at the agency, which include Innovative Practices and Programs, North Carolina Virtual Public Schools, the Research and Evaluation Team, Learning Recovery, as well as charter schools. And together, we really try and codify as well as nurture and evaluate innovation across our state so we can scale effective innovations across to all students in our state as well. Outside of the projects that those individual groups own, we're also really working closely on school performance grades. So if you feel like we've been talking about this for a while, you're right. But we are actually almost at the end of that process. And I'm really excited to say that in a few short months, we should be coming up with some new recommendations around indicators for the school performance grades and really rethinking what we value around high quality education in North Carolina. So looking at multiple measures for school quality in North Carolina. And we're hoping that we can not only bring that to various stakeholders before we bring it to the GA, but our goal is to get that in the short session. With implementation a few years from now, obviously lots of piloting would go on. So school performance grade is a big hallmark of our work. Also working closely with Portrait of a Graduate. If you haven't already seen, we've got rubrics and I can statements. I don't want to steal that from a presenter in just a second. And then lastly, really working around competency-based education and piloting that work. So lots of great things sitting inside of the Office of Innovation. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues who will give you a little more detailed information about the things I just mentioned. Thank you, Richard.
Next, we will have Dr. Angie Molnax from the Office of Innovation.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. So I'm going to talk about a few different pieces. In 2022, we started the North Carolina Promising Practices Clearinghouse. As you see on the screen there, we have a map across North Carolina, and we have expanded that a great deal over the last almost 2 years. All of those stars that you see on the map are practices, And we've color coded those for you based on year, as well as some portrait of a graduate exemplars that I'll talk about here in just a minute. As you go to the Promising Practices Clearinghouse, if you haven't gone on there yet, of which I know our two superintendents that we have in the ARP community of practitioners both have practices in there from their school districts. If you haven't visited that, you can filter it several different ways by Operation Polaris strand, by Portrait of a Graduate strand, or by year, as I explained. One thing that I'd like to highlight that's within the Promising Practices Clearinghouse are some Portrait of a Graduate exemplars. As Dr. Andrew Smith mentioned, we rolled out the Portrait of a Graduate in October of 2022, so about a year ago. Since then, we have also provided some supporting resources, such as the rubrics aligned to all of the grade spans, ICANN statements, and some other resources to the field. We also have these Portrait of a Graduate exemplars that are in the clearinghouse. You see the list there to the right. You can simply click on those hyperlinks and it'll take you to the write-up about those practices. Those are just some really great starters if you are just now familiarizing yourself with the Portrait of a Graduate. I'd encourage you to kind of comb through those and see what some of the districts and charter schools are doing across our state. And then also within the clearinghouse, we have lots of practices, but just ones really related to the folks on this call today. We have some summer programming practices that we have spotlighted both from last summer and from this summer. Those include summer programming for the Summer Bridge, the Career Accelerator, as well as some Read to Achieve camps. And you'll see as you're reading through some of those that oftentimes districts might have been running a Summer Bridge alongside a Read to Achieve camp. So some of those write-ups are kind of braided together as you're reading through those. We also have some practices in there on ESSER sustainability. One of our school districts has really done a great job in partnering with Research Associates, which is an external third-party organization, to help them to find grant funding to sustain some of their ESSER fundings. And then we've recently learned about another district that is doing a similar approach with another third-party vendor, so we will lift that one up as well. And as we come across other practices that districts and charter schools are using so that they can sustain those ESSER programs and try to at least sustain them as best as possible with as little change from one to the next. We'll continue to lift those up for everyone. Also, if you go to the clearinghouse and you have any trouble, or if you have a practice that you want to submit, you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to jump on a call and help you out, or to listen and hear about your practice that you'd like to submit. You can also reach out to anyone that you hear or that you see on this call today from DPI, and they'll connect you to me. And with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Jenny Korn, our Director of the Office of Research and Evaluation.
Great. Thank you, Angie. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. Okay, Richard, you will go to the next slide, or whoever's driving.
Dr. Korn.
Can you guys go to the next slide, please? Great. So I was going to give you an update on just several. We've got a few new initiatives. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation in the Office of Innovation. One of our most exciting new projects is this North Carolina Practitioners Network. We're going to be talking about this tomorrow at our State Board of Education meeting. So we, based on some feedback we got from our superintendents, charter leaders, and the State Board of Education, we had a request, because we'd been doing all this work to get data and evidence out to the field. And so one of the requests and pieces of feedback we got back was, what are we doing to build the capacity of our district leaders to actually use data and design local research studies? So we are partnering, if you go to the next slide, Richard, We are partnering with the UNC School of Education and faculty from Harvard and Georgetown to do basically a kind of a course on research and evaluation, evidence-based policymaking for local leaders. And we're going to be doing this. This is our first cohort that we're going to be doing this with. It's really focused on kind of studying the impacts of ESSER and impacts of the pandemic on local school systems. If you go to the next slide. So it's really to help develop recovery-focused intervention and an evaluation plan that will really help local leaders kind of learn how to collect and analyze data to answer questions, generate key findings, develop recommendations, and then communicate and sustain the work. We're going to be doing our first cohort of that this academic year. The reason we wanted to make sure that this group was aware of it is because we're using some of our ESSER 3 funds to kind of build out this network for the first time. We are currently already looking, we had such interest in participating in this that we're already looking for additional funds to help us do a secondary or even a third cohort and continue this work going. If you'll go to the next slide. So the intent of this partnership is to build stronger relationships between district leaders, DPI staff, and university faculty to develop a deeper understanding of how to use local data to design kind of local research and evaluation studies, and then to build some capacity around using data to guide local investments and interventions. Next slide. So so far we have, or for this cohort, and I notice I keep saying this cohort because I have every intention of doing another round of this. But we have 16 districts that raised their hands and said they wanted to participate in this project with us, this initiative with us. And you guys can see it's a really good mix of like big and small, and east and west and central. I just feel like this group is going to learn some that are like city school districts, some are the big county school districts. I just feel like we're all going to learn so much together on this. In this project, and really looking forward to working, kind of getting into the work with our district leaders. If you go to the next slide. So it's based on this kind of two kind of foundational foundations for the work. One is around research practice partnerships. So that establishes equitable partnerships between researchers and practitioners, and both designing, implementing, and then using kind of evidence from research. And then the general sort of principles of the research design process. If you go to the next slide, Richard. And we've identified this, a practical research guide that we'll be using throughout this sort of, it's kind of like a short course. It's a blended model, face-to-face, online. We'll be able to use DPI's instance of Canvas, so we'll be able to access these resources in a sustainable way going forward. But we're really using this guide for reference. These are the researcher partners that we have from Harvard and Georgetown are the authors of this book. And it really does provide sort of a common sense approach for local district and charter leaders for using research and evidence to guide decisions at the local level. If you go to the next slide. And again, just overview of the core activities. District leadership will participate in 5 basically workshops, 2 in person, 3 online, and then they get a faculty coach as part of this project. And then we'll be disseminating information about what we're learning, what we're doing, and then the districts will have an opportunity to submit an evaluation plan, like a proposal for additional funding to continue their partnership with their faculty coach for the next 2 academic years. If you go to the next slide. So we are currently actively recruiting. We've got our district set. Now we are doing some matchmaking with faculty. One of the priorities for us is we really wanted the faculty to kind of be regionally based, that they could drive in and meet with the district in person. They could provide supports with like a local board presentation, or come and do presentations with principals or teachers. And so we're actively recruiting faculty from all over the state, really excited to be able to have some partnerships with public institutions and our private institutions too. We are very lucky in North Carolina to have so many research resources around the state, and trying to think about how we can build long-term, long-lasting relationships between our districts and faculty. If you go to the next slide. And that's actually the end of mine. I think that was what I was going to be talking about with you guys. I'll be on through the end of the call. I don't know when or if we're doing questions, but I'm really excited about this kind of one of our final activities that we'll be doing using our ESSER funds at the agency.
Thank you, Dr. Corn. Now, we would like to ask, are there any questions among our community of practitioners? Please feel free to unmute yourself, and we'd like to have one person speaking at a time. Well, she has a volume on. Oh, I heard something. Turn it up.
With that,
I will ask again, are there any questions? Okay. We're going to move forward. Okay. Now, going back to the agenda, we have had updates from all parts of the Office of Innovation. And now we want to go over ESSER supports. This involves the entire group. And this goes back to the two questions that Rachel had spoken of earlier. What do districts and schools need most right now to help them most responsibly and effectively spend the remaining ESSER funds? And how should the ARP convening look this year? Because we usually meet in the summer, but we're wanting to know what would be the most effective way to bring this information out in a convening type style. I have my quizzical eyebrows up, waiting for your statement.
This is Luann Llewellyn, and I formerly represented the migrant education students. My concern is that the seniors who we now have in cohort are those students who began 9th grade after March of 2020. I think that we need responsibly to take a very close look at those seniors to see about their credit attainment level. I have been doing some research, and even though Future Ready Success states that our seniors can graduate in North Carolina with 22 credits, however, once you start looking at most districts, they require more than 22 credits. I feel very strongly that this is unfair to marginalized populations such as children and youth experiencing homelessness, the migrant education program students, as well as multilingual learners. I do not feel that asking them to do more than 22 credits to graduate is equitable, nor do I think that is fair. So I would personally like to see things put into place to look at our most marginalized students to make sure that they can graduate with 22 credits across North Carolina, since that is what North Carolina states, and that if they need additional support and help, I think those seniors and juniors really need to be a focus.
Thank you. Next.
This is Tiffany Farrell in Belmont, North Carolina. I'm a mother and on this team as just a parent observer. But as such, I would love for the parents to know that these funds are available and decisions are being made. about how to help their kids, because I think that they should be part of the conversation, that they know what their kids need. They know how they've fallen behind, and they have ideas about what could help them catch up. And that's not only with the exceptional children and ESL population, but the population in general. And I'll echo what our last speaker said, especially those who are thinking about going on to higher education and then also into the workforce. What could be some of those bridges that could help those children, since we've had so much disruption to their educational career?
Okay, this is Lucy Edwards.
Excellent.
This is Lucy Edwards, and I just want to piggyback on some of the things that have been said. This is great information that is being given to us, but how can we get this information out to the school districts? I'm from Eastern North Carolina, in one of the Tier 1 districts. And how can we get this information to our superintendents and to our directors in the district to make sure that they pay attention to it and just utilize these services? Being a member of I know that I can share some things, but I feel it would be better, it would have a greater impact if it came from, the leadership in this organization. Just how can we do that?
I can speak a little bit to that. Some of the things we've done previously, and then we would obviously love your thought partnership as we think about some next steps. But we, for the first time last spring, late winter, spring of 2023, we went out into the field. And so Richard and other folks on his team, as well as Dr. Jenny Korn's team, went into the field, went to Eastern North Carolina, went to Western North Carolina, the far west, and sat down with them and provided new levels of data that we've just never had before. And so we worked with our data providers who have all of our student outcomes, which is the name is SAS, to look at that data in new ways. So we were hoping to get visibility around just more than just, all right, here's a test score for a school, but how did children in various demographics perform? And we looked at new ways to cut that data. For example, we looked at military connected kids out east. We have lots of kids whose parents are connected to the military. How did they perform compared to peers? How do kids who live in rural areas compare to those not in rural areas? And many, many more ways to cut the data, to then say and provide that data to school leaders to say, here's something to think about. If there's a gap in here that you've never seen before, how can we work with you on best practices to help intervene for these kids? And to that point, especially for seniors. Seniors have been in, really an unprecedented high school, right? They were coming in as ninth graders with COVID. They really didn't get to benefit from a normal high school experience. So how are we looking at their gaps of instruction and outcomes and ensuring we're meeting those? And so we're hoping that by providing this new data set to leaders, that they can now have visibility to those children and then start to do something about it. So we have two superintendents on this call who know far better than I do about how they really get at thinking about seniors and thinking about those students. I think just to mention one, Dr. Houlihan's on here from Union. They have an intensive high dosage tutoring program that gets at ensuring all kids are ready. And so there's lots of communication we have to do on our side, but to be frank and honest, the real work of that, where the rubber meets the road, sits with our superintendents and the school leaders with them. I don't know if any of them want to speak to that. I'm not to put them on the spot.
Thank you, Andrew. Ms. Edwards, my name is Matthew Cheese. I'm superintendent in Beaufort County. And what I can say is much of the information may actually be beneficial going back through your 8 RESAs in the state, where superintendents who attend those meetings on a monthly basis hear one voice at one time, where 15 to 20 superintendents can then have dialogue about what it looks like, sounds like, feels like, both in their own communities, but in the regions around them. So if you have greater questions, I'd love to share my information with you, since you're over here in the East, and we can talk through some of the opportunities that we might be able to collectively do together.
And I'll just mention, it's not just LEA, so there's also charter schools. We have a charter school rep on here as well. Stephen Gay is on here as well. So I don't want to miss out on that opportunity there as well, having school leaders in both traditional LEAs as well as charter schools. So not to put you on the spot, Stephen, if there's anything you want to say there.
Yeah, Dr. Smith, if there's a superintendent or any school leader that hasn't heard about this, they've been under a rock. I mean, coming from the charter school world, your office, OLR, Dr. Korn, Dr. Marr, everybody has been open over the last year, sharing it in different locations. The AIM conference, NCASA last year, I mean, it's been out there. There's lots of information that's out there using those funds. So if somebody doesn't know, they're living under a rock. So, but Dr. Cheeseman was right. I mean, the RESA is a great place because you have all the superintendents in one place. Now, charter schools are not there, but charter schools, y'all have done a great job reaching out to us because I know we monitor you and for innovation. So that's been really good. On the other part, I want to add one thing about, if you want to talk about specifics, like PRC 189, since there's 75% of those funds that are still out there available, and there's any way to allow us to have more flexibility in what we can use those for, you know, instead of like after school or summer programs, or like from my own example at my own school, at our school is, you know, right now we're not gonna be able to use those funds by the end date just because of what we have, but we have other programs we can take that money and use to help enhance those programs. So I don't know if that's a possibility at all, because I know it's kind of limited by the way they were written or dispersed.
Yes, and the data has been, you know, really, they've done a great job with presenting that information to us, all the conferences. And, you know, I've seen Dr. Korn at several conferences along with the rest of the school board members. Just, you know, I was just asking if, you know, how do our directors and everyone, how do we make sure that, you know, everybody is getting all of the information and using it to the best of their ability? Our district has done a great job in spending ESSA funds, and we do have a great plan for the rest of it through 24. But there are some districts, you know, in the area, you know, that I'm very close to, and just wanted to make sure that everybody gets that information. But yeah, you've done a great job. Thank you.
Ms. Edwards, I will also let you know, one way that you can make sure that you're getting all of the information that comes out from our office is we have just started doing a bi-weekly newsletter where we have updates from both the research and evaluation and the Office of Learning Recovery. So we're also providing updates about preparing for the ESSER audits and things like that. And that's open to anyone in the public. We'll make sure that we send that out with the minutes so that you all can sign up for that if you are interested. And also additionally, to speak to the question about the flexibility of some of our OLR programs, that is by and large the biggest feedback that we've gotten is, can we use this for other purposes other than after school or summer? So I did explore that as an option, but unfortunately it is part of the state set aside that's required by the U.S. Department of Ed to be utilized on either summer programming or after school. We did recently go to the board to open up the allotment policy for PRC 189. Originally that was just limited to math, but now we've opened it up so that you can use it on the subject area that you all need to use it for the most in your school or district. So that's one of the other challenges. And so I'd love to hear if you all have any thoughts about how we could assist PSUs and charter schools further in making sure they're spending these funds that they have for these programs that are a little bit more limited than the general ESSER 3 funds.
Thank you. Ms. Walker Kelly, I see your hand.
Thank you. One of the points that I wanted to follow up on is, you know, making sure that districts and schools, you know, use their money effectively. And one thing that we've talked about in previous meetings before is making sure that school districts know exactly what they can spend the money on, because that is one of the biggest challenges that we've run into in advocating for the use around ESSER funds. So just refreshing our school districts, our school leaders, our school board members about what they can actually spend the money on, because part of that is the hesitation to spend the money is because they don't know what they can use it for. And then the second thing around sustainability is working with school district leaders, including the chief financial officer, in building a financial plan that utilizes the district budgets to sustain programs and initiatives beyond the ESSER money, because that is also part of the hesitation of spending money, is that many of the school districts don't want to spend money on staffing or on programming that they can't sustain once the money stops. And so part of working with those, particularly the chief financial officer and the school districts, in creating a plan for sustainability beyond that would be helpful in encouraging more school districts to spend their money.
All right, thank you. Do we have anyone else?
I'll just add, this is Dr. Houlihan in Union County. I'm glad Tamika said that, because the sustainability question is the one that we're all thinking about right now, is when the spending deadline hits and the funds go away, how are we going to sustain some of the really great work that has been happening in our schools, both during and after the pandemic. So Tamika, thank you for raising that concern, because it is a big challenge to think about. In terms of the convening, I just want to advocate for two things. One, continue to build the promising practices page, because that is a really good resource for school districts to use. I would hope that doesn't go away when ESSER funds expire, because I would hope that annually we would continue to build up those strategies. And secondly, at the convening, whether that's in person or however that's going to structure, I know that we spend a lot of that time talking through data and kind of where school districts have been, where they're going, looking at various reports. I'd like to also ask that we continue highlighting both charter and school public PSUs on some of those ongoing best practices that can be sustained post ESSER funding, where districts have found ways to make that work.
Dr. Houlihan, I got a quick question for you, since we're kind of soliciting some feedback around these. We've really debated around, we've always done it in July. It's kind of always been our cadence for this thing. But we've really been talking about perhaps July's too late. Like, is there anything actionable in July when all that spending has to be done by September 30th? Would you have a preference there? Should it be earlier? Is July still enough time? And maybe that's linked to exactly what we're going to try and do during that meeting as well. But any initial thoughts as you guys think about that, and open that up to anybody else as well?
Yeah, that's a good point. The challenge you're going to have with this year in particular is by the time usually the middle to end of May hits, all local PSU districts' budgets have been finalized at the local level. So if there's anything that we're looking for sustainability, best practices for that might have to come from state or local funds, we have to start thinking about that now, right? And so my one opinion, but you might want to consider for this year, looking at having that convening much earlier, possibly in a February, March timeframe, if that's even possible, because as we're building our budget request and looking at those best practices around really good programming that's happening in schools, how do we then advocate for that and have the data to back up the fact that it's working to present in our budget requests, whether that's to state leaders or to local county commissioners. So I would advocate for an earlier convening.
Thank you. Helpful.
Thank you. I'm seeing a suggestion for early spring as well. So definitely, thank you.
Yes, and to that point, I also wanted to share with this group something that our office is starting to work on, and now that Dr. Houlihan has shared kind of that time frame, that is the timeframe that we had started to look at, but definitely wanted to get y'all's feedback on it. But something that we're hoping to do, in addition to highlighting some of the promising practices and best practices around sustainability, because we do have folks across the state who are doing a good job of planning for sustainability. So we do want to highlight those, but we are also going to be looking at this concept of something that we don't talk about a lot in education, which is our return on investment, and really looking at all of the ways that we're spending our money, because now is the time to do it, right? Because we're facing this fiscal cliff. So we really want to make sure that our districts and schools have the tools that they need in order to determine which programs and interventions are working the best for them, and which programs they might need to deselect, even if those are programs that were funded historically. And so we are hoping that within that time frame of February-ish, that we will be able to provide you all with a workshop as well as a suite of tools to help you kind of assess your return on investment. And this could be used in your working in your budgeting sessions with your board, as well as internally with across your multiple departments within your district or within your school. So if you all have any initial thoughts on that as well, we'd love to hear that. That's kind of, when talking with Dr. Smith, we were wondering if people might think we were a little crazy for talking about return on investment in the education space, but I think it's definitely needed.
Thank you, Luann. And feel free to enter your comments into the chat, because that also helps us get your feedback when it comes to hearing from fellow practitioners, but as well, it allows them to speak and see your insights as well. So thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay. Allergies will not let me speak fast enough to be an auctioneer. So we can say it's going once, going twice. This is the Quiet Storm version of an auctioneer. Last call. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. So we have now completed our meeting. And unless there is any additional business at this time, we do have one additional business item.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I just wanted to also let you all know that in addition to the poll that you'll receive to vote on chair for this committee, we will also send out an availability poll for future meetings, and the future meeting dates will go out with once we determine who will be the chair of the committee. So I wanted to let you know that. Originally, this committee was supposed to convene on a quarterly basis. We have since gone to the board and asked to be made an advisory board. So that means that we meet as needed, essentially. But we do want to get your feedback on some of these tools that we were talking about, as well as flesh out a bit more some ways that the tools that we're developing might support you all, get your feedback on that. Also talk through some communication pieces, how we might help districts communicate better with parents, whether that looks like templates or other types of communication tools. And then also ways to communicate better with school boards. So we have lots of things that we would like to get your feedback on in a 2-hour meeting in the future. So we'll send out at least 2 other options for future meeting dates. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that that will be coming as well.
Thank you, Rachel. Any others? Hearing nothing, I would love to have a motion for us to adjourn the meeting and a second?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We can stay on as long as you like.
I second the motion.
All right, we have a motion that we adjourn the meeting. May I have a second? Oh, got you. You were the second. Thank you. All right. Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, and have a great afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis.